Hello out there. This is Serpent's Right coming to you from the depths of quarantine. Day 12. Almost done. 2 weeks almost over. It's been interesting. I'm sure it has been for many. I'm going to make this one. I'm going to try and make this one short. It's a strange thing that occurred to me. I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it into a video, but here we go. During this time in quarantine, I was given advice by a certain Catholic bishop that the internet may be well familiar with, Bishop Robert Barron. On the second day of my quarantine, I saw this.
Now we can shake our fists at this and say how terrible, or perhaps can we make this a Pascalian moment and say, okay, I've got the opportunity now, it's a rare opportunity, to sit quietly in a room alone and wrestle with the deep questions of life. Maybe this is a great spiritual opportunity. That's what's been occurring to me. Can I recommend this is your moment to read one of the spiritual classics? So maybe a lot of us, we've heard about these great texts and these great, books, but we never read them. See, mind you, prior to the Enlightenment, most of the most brilliant people in the West gave themselves to philosophy, theology, and spirituality. And they left behind this treasure trove of texts. One of the problems of the Enlightenment is we look at math and science and physics and chemistry, and those are all great. They're all great. But we tend to overlook the spiritual richness of our tradition. Well, here's your chance. Here's your time. Could I recommend a couple things? Get a copy of St. Augustine's Confessions. There are a lot of good translations. Maria Balding's is my favorite. It's a contemporary translation. It makes it read a bit like a novel. Frank Sheed has a wonderful kind of classic translation of the Confessions. But get St. Augustine's Confessions. Read especially the first 9 books of it, where he tells the story of his life. The miracle of that book is, though it's written in the 4th century, trust me, you'll recognize yourself in it.
And so I did. And I confess, I have only reached book 7 as of this recording, but it is the end of the month, and I have been neglecting this. So, something very strange occurred to me during the reading of the Confessions. He was telling his life. He actually started out in book 1, St. Augustine did, in his infancy. He tried to compare notes of accounts he received from nurses, from his mother, and from his own observations of infants, and tried to piece together what he was up to while he was an infant. So you can tell this man is very invested in this project of confessing his life and tracing back what's happened. I did recognize myself in it, strangely. That's the strange thing. It's such an old book, but no, I see myself in him. In very many ways. But something strange caught my attention in the beginning of book 3, which starts out, I came to Carthage, where a cauldron of unholy loves was seething and bubbling all around me. I was not in love as yet, but I was in love with love, and from a hidden hunger I hated myself for not feeling more intensely a sense of hunger. I was looking for something to love, for I was in love with loving. This was, book 3 was written about his 16th year of life, his coming into adolescence, into, I suppose, what we would call young adulthood. All kinds of things emerging, his growing up into the man he will be later on in life. And in that time, he was looking for something to attach himself to, almost. I wonder if there are any listeners to this, if anyone can relate to this similar story of mine, where in my 16th year, around about secondary school, I was surrounded by friends who seemed to be attached to things in a love-like way, as if they loved the things that they were attached to. The common things were video games, they being, in my years, Halo, Pokemon, Digimon, StarCraft, World of Warcraft, anime, these being Death Note, Code Geass, that came out later, Attack on Titan, Sword Art Online, comic books, Batman, Superman, DC, Marvel, sci-fi, Star Wars, Star Trek, Warhammer. And all of these things I tried, not out of any love that I manifested for them in particular, but because I wanted to be attached to something, but I never could get myself hooked in like any of my peers seem to be hooked into these things, and for some reason, and I don't know if it's the same thing that St. Augustine is referring to, but for some reason, that's what I felt I wanted to be, hooked in to something. Someone who would go to cons, who would craft costumes, who was so devoted to a fandom, I suppose. He would write fan fiction. It's cringeworthy to think of now, but that's what I wanted. I wanted to be in that state, and I wanted to be in that state, but I could never bring myself to it. And it never laid itself out to me that way. And then I was introduced to a game called Minecraft that was then an alpha. And curious, I decided, I'll look it up on YouTube and see what's going on. And I came across these guys.
Hooray! Minecraft! We've created a new server and we're going to show people how to play Minecraft, how to survive the first night. It's beautiful!
Oh my god, it's terribly snowy. What on earth happened here?
This game is beautiful.
It is.
Made by a single man.
The Yogscast, who I discovered around 2011, started putting out videos on Minecraft. Started as simple tutorials showing people how to play, which is what I was actually looking for initially, but as most people watching this probably know, it grew into a much bigger success story than that. What attracted me to these videos, I think, was the narrative that they were able to weave together using this game. Similar to a kind of thing that Rooster Teeth did with Red vs. Blue, using a game as a sort of set piece and stage to craft their own narrative and story. For some reason, this was very, very popular. It became to be known as machinima, and as it caught on, I got sucked into it. So here it was at last, that thing that I could be sucked into, that thing that I could have its hooks sink into me, that thing that I wanted to be in love with. I think that hunger that I felt was satiated, and I was entranced. I watched almost every episode of Yogscast Shadow of Israfel. In fact, I did watch every episode of Yogscast Shadow of Israfel and their survival series, and almost every other series that came after it. I got sucked into other YouTubers, Minecraft channels, Chimney Swift 11, Tobuscus, so on and so forth. It occupied so much of my time, and I look back on it and think, why? You know? It seemed like such a waste of time, especially as the time went on when I would just start watching Let's Players, as they came to be known. For the entertainment value alone, it seemed to change in a certain way. I started watching channels like Nerd Cubed and PewDiePie, of course, who were Let's Players in a different way. There was no narrative being created, no story being told. It was just them playing the game and you watching them play the game and living vicariously through them in some way. It wasn't like playing the game itself, it was something else. And looking back on it now, I have to say I don't know why I was doing it. I don't know why it was Let's Play videos that ended up being my snare, or why I should have wanted a snare to begin with. Perhaps I was in love with the narratives. Perhaps I simply liked the personalities and enjoyed seeing their reactions, but all the same, I certainly wasn't the only one. These videos had tens of millions of views. These channels had millions of subscribers. This was a lucrative business by the year 2012. Why was it so popular? What happened? Why? Why was I doing that? What was I after? Entertainment? Mere pleasure? Or was it the story? In some cases I think it was the story, but in other cases I think it was, well, the same element in man that makes him addicted to sport, competitive sport, only digitalized, a new form. I've always disliked football, especially, although I've never been in a position to be snobbish about it because I suffer from a similar affliction, and it is esports, I suppose. I don't think there's much use in discriminating between the two. They're probably, in essence, very similar. Why did I spend so much time looking for a snare only to be ensnared and inevitably waste so much time on unprofitable things? Why did I sink my time into that when I could have been doing something else? Something profitable. Learning a skill. Learning. Thinking. Why did I spend so much time distracting myself? And distracting myself from what?
The great 17th century French philosopher Blaise Pascal was one of my spiritual heroes. He has a famous one-liner I've always savored. He said, "All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone." Now, I know that sounds like an introvert's fantasy, but he's getting at something very interesting. Namely, most of us spend most of our time diverting ourselves from the serious and important questions. So Pascal talked a lot about divertissement in his French, diversions or distractions. So instead of dealing with the great questions of, does God exist? Who am I? Why am I here? Heaven and hell, where am I going? The purpose of my life, all the great questions. What we do most of the time is we seek out divertissement, distractions.
I'm left wondering now, was there any profit in it? Was there any good in it? Did I learn anything? Did I profit from it at all? And perhaps in some way I did. It's kept me pretty stupid. And I think this has had its benefit. It's kept me from being proud. Whenever I get delusional ideas about self-grandeur, about, say, my eloquence or intellect or imagined self-importance, I always come up against a harsh reality. I'm actually pretty stupid. I'm actually not very eloquent. I'm actually quite unimportant. And I think this habit in early life contributed to that. Now, why is that a good thing? Well, it instills in one a humble spirit at the very least. Reminds one of limitations, fragility, ultimately mortality. And this time more than ever has reminded me of that. Gosh, this has been a strange one. Why did I start thinking of this? I suppose many of us, many of you, dear imagined or not, friends, will have thought in a similar vein, not in necessarily this one, but have thought, what have I done? What has my life been so far? Have had time to contemplate on that. And no wonder we avoid it otherwise, because sometimes the answers are not comforting. Still, if this could be a profitable time for us, maybe we could recognize in what ways we failed in the past, in what ways we have been not what we could be. In recognizing the fragility of our culture, our society, the systems around us, the invisible systems that keep us in this comfort, that they could come apart at any moment, or are not quite as solid as we may have been deluded into thinking they are. And we are not quite as solid as we have been deluded into thinking we are. I'd like to share just one more piece by St. Augustine before I end this rather rambly and incoherent video. Book 5, Chapter 3. Thou drawest near to none but the contrite in heart, and canst not be found by the proud, even if, in their inquisitive skill, they may number the stars and the sands, and map out the constellations, and trace out the courses of the planets. I don't know what this video is. I honestly thought that after all this time I had to get my thoughts in order, I'd have something more, but this is what occurred to me, so this is what I've said. Of course, I haven't worked exceptionally hard on this video, because I've procrastinated again and have simply made it to meet a quota. But perhaps that's alright. I am, for the most part, making these videos to say what I think, to get it out of my head and into the ether. And so, I can't imagine anyone wants to watch this, but that's alright. I remind myself and try to make myself feel better, I suppose. I suppose in the end, it's just disappointment with myself. Pride, frustrated, potential not capitalized on. But it has given me a humble perspective to start with. And perhaps, in the end, that is a greater gift than any skill or art. Perhaps in the end, when it comes to ultimate things, that will be the more profitable.